My name is Henry Austin and I completed a Master's and PhD at UWA, and I started in 2015. I became interested in psychology because I was really interested in things. I'm really interested in science, but I'm also really interested in philosophy, and so at some point the philosophy of the mind got interesting to me. And then kind of thinking about which one of these is the best way to think about the mind, like from a scientific perspective or from a kind of philosophy perspective, or both. And I knew that I wanted to work with people and make a difference in people's lives, so those kind of things all converged on psychology and clinical psychology. I think what influenced me to do a PhD in the first place was that I had a really good experience with my honours degree. I found it really, really hard actually, but I found that I built some relationships in that year and started to really get into doing a bit of my own original research and realising the value of having an idea and kind of bringing the idea to life and testing it out. So I knew that I wanted to keep going with that scientific approach and doing research in the future, so that's why I chose to do the Master's PhD at UWA, so I could have some clinical training and training in how to do original research, which I found really creative, and I liked that part of it as well. My PhD supervisor was my honours supervisor, who actually taught me in a research unit before then, so I kind of knew that I was interested in the research that she did, and B, got along with her, and so then I had a good experience during my honours year with that supervisor. So I decided that given our research interests were quite aligned, although I was still really working out what I wanted to do at that point, like I didn't have a great picture of what it was going to be yet. It was really early days then. Because our interests were converged well, and because I got along with that supervisor, I decided to pursue a PhD with her, and then she had some relationships with other academics, so we got those on board and ended up building a team of 4 supervisors for my project. One of the challenges with the PhD was actually the bureaucracy of it and the admin of it. I think that's because I was in a particularly different situation where my PhD was actually done with an international university at the same time. And it got pretty complicated to work out how I could meet the requirements of both universities at the same time. And luckily I had these 4 supervisors who were really, really good at navigating the bureaucracy of things as well. And that's actually an important skill, I think, in academia. So that was a big challenge, and I was lucky to have a supervisory team who were good at working out how to solve problems like that. I think the biggest challenge I faced during my PhD was that sometimes when you're doing a PhD, problems come along in the way that you have to write something, or in the way that you statistically analyze something, and sometimes your work in a day actually feels like it takes you backwards because you identify this problem and realize that you have to rerun analyses, or you have to rewrite an introduction or something to include some new piece of research. So I think a genuinely hard thing about it was that if you're not collecting data and seeing like these people come in and your data set grow, you tend to miss out on like objective feedback about having progressed. So sometimes progress in a PhD in a day is actually having less words on the page than when you started. And in that way, it can be kind of rewardless until you really get to the end. So I think the hard thing was like just noticing that sometimes solving problems or even identifying problems is progress, even if it means that you have to rewrite something a bit or reanalyze something a bit. And I have one supervisor who reflects on this in academic work as well, and the way she deals with it is to have a to-do list of all the stuff that you have to do, but also a to-da list of the things that you discovered that you didn't know you had to do. So like if you find a problem that you didn't know was there, then that goes on your to-da list, and then if you find anything else that you didn't expect you have to do and it was actually an achievement, you put it on the to-da list. So at the end of the day, you can actually see that you have made progress. and it was really important to find those things, right? But I think your brain can miss that stuff unless it's words on a page or people coming through the door. It can be hard to notice that you've actually progressed with things. So I found that challenging. I think I learned a couple of important things during my PhD. Firstly, when you put stuff off, it doesn't go away. So I think that's an important lesson for us to learn. And also, I think I learned that a PhD is really a training program in research, and it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, a lot of the point of it is to learn skills as you go. So I think learning to see it as a research training program rather than this like single thesis that had to be totally perfect was a really, really important lesson. And I think another important lesson was that enjoying it is really, really important. And for me, that meant like building relationships with people, etc. along the way. And I think if you have a really good, strong relationship with your supervisors and with your colleagues in the lab, that makes the process a whole lot easier and makes it really, really enjoyable. So I think that's something I learned as well in research, is that it's actually very social and very interpersonal, and that if you lean into that, you can really learn stuff from other people, learn how they manage the difficult times as well. So I think that's an important lesson I learned. If I had my time again, I would probably try to give myself an easier time of the PhD. I probably did more studies than was necessary, and some of them were really quite complex and complicated. So I think if I was gonna do it again, I'd be thinking about creating some studies or designing some studies that are elegant but not necessarily complicated, so that you can ensure that what you're doing is kind of realistic and it's not too hard for you to write down afterwards and not too hard for you to analyze. So I think thinking about your research question, it would be important to think about kind of an elegant, simple way of testing it out rather than a complex one that might hold you up a bit. I coped with the stress by having an afternoon nap under my desk sometimes, which actually was very refreshing and quite useful. But also giving yourself the freedom to take some time off. So I had a bit of time off in the middle to do one of my hobbies, which is music, and that was actually really, really important. And also keeping all that stuff going on the side, like doing some social things, doing your exercise, making sure you have time for other life stuff is really, really important. And getting to know the people that you work with, I think, and having a big social team at work made things a lot easier in terms of the stressful periods. So if I was really not looking forward to going to a day of writing or a day of data analysis or data entry or something, the thing that really helped me out with that was going to spend some time with my friends in the lab. You know, at worst case scenario was that I got to spend some time with some nice people. Well, the first thing I'll say was that mine was complicated by the fact that I had to submit at UWA, do a written examination for UWA, and then I had to submit it to the University of Amsterdam, have it assessed again, and then do a public thesis defense. But in terms of the process at UWA, the lead up, so you're obviously writing a lot towards the end and polishing things up a lot, and there's a lot of admin as well, so there's heaps of forms to fill out. You're also preparing to have some kind of party on the day and let your family and friends know that you're submitting on that day to have a bit of a celebration. So it's like all these areas in your life just focusing on one particular date, and the whole time you're kind of anxious about whether you're actually ever going to get there, or whether the day is going to come and you won't be finished or something. But of course you are. So that's kind of what the process is like at the end. And then you press submit or you hand it over at the desk, and hopefully my advice for the submission process is to make sure you celebrate it and have some people there to remind you that it's an achievement rather than just something to get off your back. The advice I would give would be to get connected with other people in your lab, or if you have a small lab, then just other people who are doing their PhD. Make sure you get connected with other people, because the social side of it can help you with the stress, but you also learn lots of skills from other people and different approaches to the PhD that you might miss out on otherwise. So I think that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is make a to-do list so you can get a bit of feedback about your progress and help you out when it feels like you're not making progress. Keep regular hours, So I sort of did a 9 to 5 approach, and then outside of that I didn't do any PhD stuff. I didn't want to work on the weekends. So I think having some boundaries around that means that you do the work that you need to do, but also means that you can switch off after hours. What's my other advice? Oh yeah, so academia is a very collaborative process, and there's lots of conferences that happen around the country and around the world. So my advice would be to bite the bullet, and although it's really, really scary, submit an abstract for a conference, for a poster or a talk or something, and go and just do that process, because it means that you get to, see a bit of the world as well, and meet some other people overseas or interstate. And it is, although scary, a really, really great experience to present your research at a conference, and you'll remember it forever. So I recommend making sure you find a conference you can go to and just committing to it. I would do it again, because doing a PhD has really changed the way I think about the world, and it really practices some kind of skills that I feel like I didn't have before. And I built some relationships with people and had some experiences traveling that I really, really, really valued. So I'd love to do that part of it again as well. And I think it's been really, really nice to think that in some small, small way, someone might use your research to do something better and greater down the track. And that's a nice thing to think as well. What would I be doing in 5 years? Probably, I'm not sure how this is possible, but a balance of clinical work, therapy, some research projects with some PhD students maybe, and doing a bit of teaching here and there, because I really like that as well. So trying to do clinical psychology across therapy, teaching and research would be ideal, because I like variety. And sometimes I also think that it might be good to be a park ranger or something. So I think about that sometimes as well.